What we are talking about is the problem with ignorance. And the problem is, we all got it. Other people's ignorance offends us. Our own ignorance we're not even aware of. Right? This is how it works. We all have it, and we don't know we have it. It's not that our ignorance doesn't offend us. It's that if we're ignorant, we don't know that we're ignorant. That's the nature of ignorance, really. And so when other people are ignorant, rather than getting offended, we might first of all think, well, wait a minute, are they ignorant of something that I think is a fact that may or may not be because I am ignorant as well? Are they ignorant because they simply haven't learned? Are they ignorant because they are innocent? It's possible. Are they ignorant because their lives have just not brought them to that point yet to learn what you've learned? We all learn at different paces. We all learn in different ways. We all learn different things. The Buddha says our own worst enemy cannot harm us as much as our unwise thoughts. No one can help us as much as our compassionate thoughts. So heads up, the ignorant sermon is really about compassion. It's about developing compassion. Because we cannot act on information that we do not have. We can't act on information we don't have. Others can't act on information they don't have. We certainly can act on the misinformation that we have picked up. And we do. And others do too. But it really bothers us when they do it. Right? Right? And I think it bothers us when we do it too, because once we realize we've been ignorant of something and have acted on it, especially in front of people, what is our first response? Often it's shame. Often it's not just I did something wrong, but someone saw me. You know, maybe I'm not as lovable as I thought I was. Maybe they won't like me anymore. Maybe I need to know more. Maybe I need to do better. Those are all of the places our heads go when we feel like we've done something wrong. I shared a few years ago a trip to Yellowstone that Bob and I took, where I listened to all of the park rangers saying the thing that you say, which is to stay at least 25 feet back from any wild animal at all. Don't block the roads. Don't do blah, blah, blah. And there was a doe elk by the side of the road, and I was mesmerized. She was just chewing on grass. I was so mesmerized by her that I crossed the street, and I was just looking at her. And without my awareness, my feet kept going closer and closer to her. And I wasn't afraid because it was a doe. What was she going to do to me, right? And then I heard, "Stay away from the elk, back up from the elk," from this big. And my very, very first reaction to that was, who is he talking to? There were other people out there as well. There were people who were closer than me. Just want to say that, right? That's what we do in our ignorance. He was worse than me. And then I realized, oh, I'm not that close. And I immediately moved back. And man, that guy he wanted to shame me. He wanted me to never forget this experience because he kept saying it over and over and over again. First on the loudspeaker, and then he came up to me on the side of the road and said, "You can't do that. And here are all the reasons why you can't do that. And you need to stop doing that. And you were too close. And don't be too close." And meanwhile, I'm having a shame attack. And also an attack of my spiritual self saying, I should be beyond shame at this point, shouldn't I? But man, it cut me at a really deep place. Because one of the things, I said, well, you know, he's like, you can be harmed. I said, I wasn't going to be harmed by a doe, you know. And he said, but what if you had startled her and she had run out into the street and she were harmed? Oh, hadn't even thought of that. I thought I knew about this situation. I was wrong. Was I a bad person because I hadn't thought it through, because I was ignorant of the situation? Was I a bad person? No, I'm a pretty good person. But I could have been cognizant of the situation had I been thinking a little harder and a little more. But the fact was, at the moment, I wasn't. I wasn't thinking. And we can't be thinking every single moment of every day. And too often, the times when we need our thinking the most is when we're paying the least attention, or when we're focused on something else, so we're not listening to the other things. This is the nature of ignorance. I cried for like 2 hours. Every time I'd start to slow down the crying, I would cry again, and I thought, what? This apparently has connected me to all the shame I've ever carried in my whole life. And I'm aware, in my house, there were the people who did it my dad's way, and there were the stupid, worthless people. And so, not wanting to be stupid and worthless, I tried to learn the right way, because it wasn't called my dad's way, it was called the right way. And for many years, I thought that was right. I thought other people were wrong who didn't do it that way. But that was my ignorance too. And that was his ignorance. He really did think he was right. Guess what? I kind of tend to assume I'm right too. Something I do. It's ignorance. Maya Angelou says, forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it. Forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it. She also said, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Right? Now I know better. I promise I'm never getting close to a doe elk or any other wild animal. She also said in one of her memoirs, I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better. And she's talking about one of the most shaming topics that many of us can face is her parenting. I did then what I knew how to do. The stakes are really high with parenting. But guess what? You're never going to do it right. There's no such thing. So yes, as enlightened as we are, we act on our lack of information, our ignorance. We also act on our misinformation. So are we to be held fully accountable if we don't have the information? Can we be held fully accountable if we don't have information? Well, certainly in Yellowstone Park, I was held fully accountable. I wasn't given a ticket, thank goodness. But someone was holding me full accountable, but I didn't know. So I was allowed to forgive myself eventually. Eventually. I'm going to tell a story on myself that's very, very painful to me. When I was 15 years old, I got very involved in theater, in a theater in Germany that was actually a British theater. But at one of the first part, and I did the leads in the musicals. I was a star, I was the only 15-year-old among a whole bunch of adults. And I held my own because I looked older and I acted older, and everybody assumed that I was older. And at a party, I met a guy who was new to the group. His name was Ben. We later became very good friends. But at that party, I asked him, which you do when you're living in a foreign country, I asked him, so where are you from? He said, San Francisco. And I said, oh, where all the fruits and flakes are from. That was me saying words from my dad's mouth. Thinking I was being funny or clever, I don't know. And as the months went on, I got to know Ben very well. And he was a beautiful, lovely, charming, giving, forgiving gay man who did not hold that against me. And I was so blessed to know that, because I tell you what, in only a few months at that theater, my ignorance got fixed in a lot of ways. Up until that time, my dad was the man. Now I'm in an adult environment where I am respected and I'm doing my thing, which I'm good at and I feel good about, and I'm meeting all kinds of people who didn't come from my church. The first time I met a couple and found out that they weren't married, they were just living together. I was like, but they're so nice. Is that crazy? Y'all, that's what fundamentalism does to you. I was assuming that I would know people who were not married and living in sin because, I don't know, they would have horns or something. I don't know what I thought. But I thought none of the nice people that I knew would be that, or be gay, or be whatever. And I learned very quickly, but they're so nice. And thankfully, I was ready to learn that. My heart was open enough. Had been broken open in a lot of ways, but my heart was open enough to learn that. Not everybody could learn in the same way at the same time if their hearts weren't open at that moment. And I don't take credit for that. It's just where I was at the time. I'm very grateful for it. It was a blessing that my heart was open. And yet, I can't look back at 15-year-old Melinda and say, what a jerk. I mean, I said a jerky thing. There's no doubt about that. But I said it from innocence and ignorance. So if I can start to know that about myself, how can I take the ignorant statements that other people make and hold that against them? Because I have to know that they just don't know. I think there is much truth to this. People are doing the best that they can with what they have, in the time they have, with where they're from. So, if we can give grace to ourselves, which I highly recommend you give grace to yourself. Otherwise, you will torment yourself for the rest of your life. And I'm not into that. I want to be a joyful person, and I cannot be a joyful person if I have all the shame that I've ever had and I'm dragging it around me from place to place, all the way through Yellowstone Park. And so I have to consciously engage in forgiving myself and letting go of those things. And then when I'm able to give grace to myself, it's so much easier for me to give grace to another. It's a beautiful quote from Meher Baba. Is God in the rose and not the thorn? Or in the flowers and not in dirt? This weakness, I love this weakness of seeing God in things you like and shuddering at the idea of God's existence in things you don't like or abhor must be overcome. It is only when you rise above all of these ideas of good and bad and recognize, see, and feel flowers and dirt alike and find God equally in all, that you could be said to have known and learned something real. If you want to not be ignorant, you have to learn something real. And this is a pretty high bar for learning something real. He says, otherwise it is all parrot-like, a false conception and illusion. One of the ways that we act in our ignorance is we act like we know when we don't. Y'all probably don't do that. But we are so afraid of being shown to be ignorant that we try to fake it until we can figure out what's going on. Other people are doing that as well. We do sort of forgive ourselves for doing that. Maybe we don't even forgive ourselves. Maybe we just let ourselves do it and don't feel that bad about it because we know that's the way I am. Other people are just that way too. Once again, the same way we can give grace. Now, there is another way to be ignorant besides never having learned. And it's this: literally ignoring what we know. Oopsie. Because I can get all fiery and preachy about someone else being willfully ignorant. You've had every chance to know, and still you don't know. It's all around you. Come on, get it together. What am I ignoring? What truth do I know, truly know, that I am not acting on, that I have not integrated, that I am not paying attention to, that I am not cultivating? that I am not nurturing. Sometimes instead of nurturing the truth that we know, we get a high, really, from getting everybody to agree with us on how terrible things are. And who are we teaching them? And what are we teaching? And what are we losing? And what are we not able to learn or simply suppressing so that we are willfully ignorant? There is also, it's easy to say, you should know. You've had plenty of opportunities to learn. Well, guess what? We've all had plenty of opportunities to learn. We have. And I sometimes am a slow student. That's just the way it is. I like to tell people I was in the remedial program. In so many ways, I was in the remedial program before I got to a place of really being willing to know the uncomfortable things and willing to hold them even in my discomfort and willing to try, not well a lot of the time, but try to act from that place. So, we also have, and we see other people have, and it really messes with us when we see other people have it, but we also have what I call privileged ignorance. If you've just never run into it, and you're living this oblivious life, are you held accountable for it? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking the questions. I'm not necessarily answering them except to say, if you have a choice, choose compassion always. You will never be wrong for choosing compassion. But so I have to take, Bob and I own this business that is hazardous materials abatement. So I have to go to school every year for CE courses to keep my license up. And I am almost always the only woman in the classroom. I am almost always surrounded by very blue-collar people who are often wearing baseball caps that say MAGA on them. And I remember a time when, I don't even know how the subject came up in the classroom, but somebody said something about minorities. And this guy said, well, I'm the minority. I'm a white man. That's the one thing you can't be in America these days, is a white man. And I, because I have done a lot of spiritual work, said, oh, did somebody try to take a star out of your crown? The rest of us didn't even get a crown. Which made him mad, probably made half the other people in the room mad, and made Bob pinch me under the table like, this is not the place, baby. So he was speaking in his ignorance, and I was acting on what I was ignoring. So we were both ignorant in the moment. We were both ignorant in the moment. But truly, apparently he doesn't know, because he's grown up with all of these rights that have never been violated. And so he doesn't understand that not everybody has that, or that for someone else to get a right that he was born to, in some way diminishes his ability to have that right. Doesn't make any sense. Like I said, somebody taking a star out of your crown, the rest of us don't have a crown. And there's truth to that, but I was also not acting in my best interests or in compassion and grace. I got there before the class was over. But so there's willful ignorance, and then there's just privileged ignorance. I, for many years, was they called me the token white girl. I was the only Caucasian at a theater in Fort Worth, which is an African-American theater. And for whatever reason, I think because they needed a really high soprano and they didn't have one, they included me in a show, and then I worked and worked and worked there, and it was my favorite place to work. And I was almost always the only white person in the room. I was the only white singer that they let sing there, and for many, 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 many years. And I grew up around lots of black people. I was in the military. We had everybody. Every classroom was full of everything you can think of, color, nationality, whatever. And so it wasn't a thing. In my mind, it wasn't a thing. And so here we are, This isn't a thing anymore. We had Martin Luther King. I read all the biographies. This is cured. This isn't a thing in my early 20s. And one day, our costume mistress, while I was backstage, was on the phone with her son, her teenage son, who was in his own driveway, washing his own car. And the police were there harassing him and saying, "This is too nice a house, you don't live here. This isn't your car." Even though he had his driver's license that listed that address as his house, even though he had his insurance policy that showed that he was the driver and the owner of that car, even though he had all the stuff, they harassed him anyway. I was like, no, this cannot be happening. This is America. This cannot be, this doesn't. I was so upset, and I bawled, and Charlesetta said, "Yeah, baby, this is what happens. Happens all the time. You have no idea how often it happens." And of course, as I was there over the years and years and years and years, I learned more and more of the stories and became more and more aware. But, I think to a large extent, our country and the world, when Obama was elected president, went, "Whew, okay, I'm glad that's over. We've conquered racism." And maybe we stopped working hard. Maybe we got a little ignorantly privileged, like, okay, we've conquered that, let's focus on something else right now. And obviously it wasn't conquered. So you see the danger of ignorance, yeah? It can be dangerous. We can harm other people. We can physically harm them. We can emotionally and mentally harm them. And until we have an inkling, we don't even have an inkling. I was reading about Marie Antoinette, who famously said, when told that her subjects could not get bread, that they were starving, she said, "Let them eat cake." Well, first of all, it's very clear that Marie Antoinette never said that. that was a quote from another author that lived 60 years before Marie Antoinette was born. And that actually she was a generous patron of charity. She was very, very aware. And here's a quote from her. This is actually a quote from a letter that she wrote to her family. "It is quite certain that in seeing the people who treat us so well despite their own misfortune, we are more obliged than ever to work hard for their happiness." That was Marie Antoinette, and she's gotten a real bad rap over the years because in our ignorance, we believe what we want to believe, or we believe what makes our righteous indignation come most firmly to the fore. So can you begin to believe that you might be wrong in the opinion you have formed about someone else's behavior or their ignorance or their privilege or their actions? Can you say that you might possibly be wrong? Because here's the deal. We don't know. One of the most enlightening phrases I think we can add to our vocabulary is, "I could be wrong." I could be wrong. I don't know. Will you please help me? I could be wrong. We don't know. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said, "Before we see the Christ in ourselves, we have to see the Hitler in ourselves." "I don't have a Hitler in me. I'm a really good girl." Well, I certainly don't have the power that Hitler did to carry out his weirdness and the horrible things prejudices that he held, and the greed, which was probably more what it was about, and power hungriness. But do I not have greed? Am I not ever power hungry? Am I not ever prejudging people? Maybe even a whole class of people? Maybe even a whole bunch of people who all wear the same kind of hat? Am I not doing that? If I'm not willing to look at that within myself, then I'm not going to be able to see the true light within me, because I have to be able to know that even with that in others, the true light is also within them. So the last thing I'll say is, if you want to get out of ignorance, pay attention. If you want other people to not be ignorant, teach them. How do you teach them? By example only, ever. You can't tell somebody something that they're not ready to know. But you can show them what an effective life is when you act from the place of what the Buddhists call beginner's mind, from I don't know. I mean, that's one of the number one ways that you can grow your spirit exponentially in a short period of time, is to start approaching the world as if you believed that you don't actually know all the things that you think you know. You don't actually know all the things that you think you know. You know, Jesus said, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. And really, the deeper teaching of that is, if you love your enemy, if you actually do that, you don't have an enemy anymore, right? The people you love are never your enemies. So if you love an enemy, you don't have an enemy anymore. So tread lightly through this life. It's a hard life in many ways, and it's also a joyful, beautiful life. Tread lightly, forgive yourself and others. Jesus also said, never truer words were spoken. They know not what they do. We know not what we do. We don't know. And so we can begin to walk through life from that idea of, I don't know, but I'm open to learn. Thank you. So we're going to take some of those ideas into meditation, and I want to just for you to join me in a chant that may be helpful in getting into the meditation. I forgive me. I forgive me for not knowing then the things that I know now. I accept me. I accept me. I make mistakes and I love me anyhow. Let's do that again. I forgive me. I forgive me for not knowing then the things that I know now. I accept me. I accept me. I make mistakes and I love me anyhow. Now, can we extend that to someone else? I forgive you. I forgive you for not knowing then the things that you know now. I accept you. I accept you. You make mistakes, and I love you anyhow. Do that one more time. I forgive you. I forgive you for not knowing then the things that you know now. I accept you. I accept you. You make mistakes, and I love you anyhow. So in this human body, in this life on earth, we do not dwell in our perfection. I don't know that that's our purpose. I believe our purpose is to open our hearts and our minds so that we might learn. And some lessons we have to learn may be very painful. And so we practice forgiveness. So breathe into that. Can you forgive yourself for whatever ignorant thing you did or said? You're already forgiven by God. It's only you that you're waiting for. And to forgive, think of it as to give something for. Sometimes it's hard to just let go of something, but if we give something in its place. So what are we going to give to ourselves for our ignorance? We can give an open mind so that we're capable of learning. We can give an open heart so that we feel the pain that is sometimes necessary for us to learn. We can give our acceptance. You make mistakes. I make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and none of those makes us unacceptable in the sight of the divine. And once you begin to open your heart and your mind to yourself, to forgive, to give something for, to give something in place of, then we have an open mind and heart to be able to forgive those whom we judge. What can we give for someone whom we have judged for their imperfection? We can give grace, the same grace that's already given to us. The cool thing is we don't even have to give our grace. It's God's grace always, and we're just passing that along. It costs us nothing. Grace is not a finite resource. You can give and give and give and give and still have all you need. And so my prayer in this time of quiet is allow us to keep our hearts and minds open enough to carry with us the thought that we might not know, but that we can never go wrong by being compassionate to ourselves or to another. I forgive you. Whatever it is you're holding yourself hostage for, consider yourself forgiven. Now the ball's in your court. You have to forgive yourself. I forgive me. I forgive me for not knowing then the things that I know now. I accept me. make mistakes, and I love me anyhow. We're not perfect, but I love us anyhow. Sing that with me. We're not perfect, but I love us anyhow. And so it is. Amen.